All right, we are here on the Schmearcast, and I wanted to talk about one of my favorite films of the year so far, and that is Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza's Warfare. And someone who agrees with me is Dan Monaghan. And Dan has a podcast of his own, Goodwill Podcasting. He's got his social channels, Real Takes, which is amazing, and Dan knows film like the back of his hand. And you've heard his voice before. People actually probably don't know, but you, Dan, recommended The Count of Monte Cristo on the End of Year podcast, which is a movie I saw that was very good. So thank you for the recommendation. Welcome officially to the Schmearcast podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Great to be here. Yeah, I was happy to be part of that at the end of the year. Count of Monte Cristo was my favorite movie last year and was able to get some people to watch it. And most people, I think, generally enjoyed it. So it's always fun to share something that one of us might not get to see without that rec.
Definitely. Well, we both recommend this film. This is Warfare. It is about a 2006 Navy SEAL mission, which we don't really even know what the hell the mission is, and that's kind of the point. Two teams take control of a multi-story house and come under increasing threat from enemy forces while tending to their own wounds. As evacuation efforts are delayed by IEDs and ongoing firefights, the soldiers work together to survive and escape the neighborhood. I want to talk about this movie in depth. Two directors, Ray Mendoza and Alex Garland. Alex Garland, an old veteran, and Ray Mendoza directing for the first time. But I want to start off by asking you, what do you think of Warfare?
Yeah, so I loved it. This is my second favorite movie of the year so far. Still early in the year. Lots of stuff to come, but I really loved it. I didn't necessarily expect to. I wasn't quite sure. I think with movies around conflicts in the Middle East, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I think it's really difficult to get media around them right. There's a lot of things to figure in. I think, in my opinion, I don't consider either war was justified, so I think it's really hard to portray that. And I think we're very used to war movies where you obviously want to be fully behind your heroes. I think that's kind of like the typical expectation. You look at stuff like 13 Hours, Lone Survivor, American Sniper. They may have a bit of commentary here or there, but they're generally pretty gung-ho, very kind of Call of Duty. You know, it's designed to get your adrenaline going, which is the entire concept behind the idea that a movie can't be anti-war because, you know, if it's stimulating your brain and you're releasing adrenaline, you're enjoying it on some level.
Sure.
And you're getting entertainment out of it. So I think the question becomes, how do you not create that reaction in someone and try to bring out more of the horror? And I think we'll maybe later get into some other movies that do that, but I think this does very, very well.
Yeah.
I don't really see, glorification of war. I don't really see dramatization. I don't see them even trying to really be cinematic in a way that you would typically expect.
Right.
This is not really about entertainment. It's just about portraying memory and helping these guys maybe work through the conflict in a way, but also work through that moment in time in Ramadi, and very much surpassed my expectations, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I was about to say, it took me by surprise as well. I've had a up and down relationship with Alex Garland, and I thought, technically speaking, this was near perfect without a false note in the direction. And like you, I was pretty shocked and horrified. I went into this with certain expectations that I think the film's marketing and Alex Garland is kind of cheekily building up, like it's called Warfare. The poster looks like a Call of Duty cover. All of the advertising is just the most strong, brolic, handsome leading men or supporting young men of Hollywood. It's daring you to hate it and take it in for what it's not. If that did get the butt in the seat, what you're then treated to is something like we've been saying, so harrowing, so nasty, so upsetting, but hyper realistic. And I think that was what I walked away from this feeling, is the realism of this was on another level, and there was no glorification. And if you come out of this movie wanting to enlist, I'd be very surprised. But on the other hand, there's like a cynicism of Alex Garland, who's not American. He brings that to all of his work, and he did that in Civil War recently. But then there is Ray Mendoza, who did serve, and there is a brotherhood that feels honest. There was a competency to the men that I couldn't help but feel and be impressed by. So on one hand, I am shocked and horrified. I am coming away from this feeling war is hell, but I don't think that it is disrespectful of the armed service.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's disrespectful. I do feel that it's honest. I mean, I think you see some things here where, again, I think your typical kind of expectations might be subverted. These are not robots. I think throughout the course of the film, I think you see them psychologically nearly to the man breaking down. I think you see Will Poulter's playing the commanding officer in this scenario. He is essentially malfunctioning as a leader. He's not really able to operate. And I think part of that is due to the intensity of the one explosion that occurs. I think that is physically affecting their brains, which I think you oftentimes in movies, I think, shell shock is something we're used to seeing in film, right? Like it's that
right 10
seconds of, where am I, blah, 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 and then it goes away and the person's running and fighting and shooting. It's like, no, like your brain is being jumbled around in that moment that has an impact on someone, like your decision making, your ability to shoot straight or think or give commands like that. That's not just a momentary situation. And I think obviously for the typical narrative, you can't have your character unable to operate for the rest of the story. No one wants to watch that, right?
Right.
But I think, that is pretty much what occurs here. And you have to be reliant on basically Charles Melton's team that comes in that element to come relieve them and help them get out of this scenario. So
I think what you're describing is one of my favorite takeaways from this, which is just how non-cliche it is. I kept waiting for war moments of the guy that like says, I'm good, but then like takes the bullet through the side of the head, or someone that comes out so super heroic and rushes across. Like, we're conditioned from war movies that we've seen to be expecting these moments. And every time I waited for it, it didn't come in a way that I felt kind of refreshed by. It's hard to say I liked or didn't like this because it's so grueling and harrowing, but I appreciated the subversion of what we've come to expect from war films, I think.
Yeah, I think subversion is the number one thing one of the main words I'd use to describe this. I think, I think there's a lot of irony and a lot of stuff that Alex Garland does. I think even that opening sequence to me is like darkly funny because I think he's conditioning you to expect some kind of, gung-ho shoot 'em up movie with all these like heroic, handsome guys kind of plowing through the incapable enemy, and like he just snaps his finger and that's all gone, and you're just in it, and it's none of that.
Right.
And I feel like it's, obviously the movie is respectful to these guys, but as I meant to say earlier, they're interpreters. Like they use them as bait. That's supposed to be a stack of all of them moving out, and they literally let them go and they die. That in and of itself, I think is fairly evil, but honest. I think there's a lot of little stuff like that is pretty powerful if you're paying attention.
Right. So I'm curious what your theatrical experience was like, because I swear in mine, I could hear the entire audience, if this is even possible, like clenching their butt cheeks and bated breath in the air. Like it was thick and tense with silence. I couldn't remember the last time I had a theater like that. Maybe genuinely Civil War with the What Kind of American Are You scene. I'm curious if your theatrical experience was as heavy as that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would say my experience was aligned with that for sure.
Ray Mendoza was the military supervisor on Civil War, and he's worked on a bunch of other films. And whatever your feelings on that film, and I'd like to ask you your feelings, I think tactically it was a wonder to behold with like the choreography of the action, and it was scary in that sense too. And Mendoza was a Navy SEAL for 16 years. Alex Garland is a sci-fi wonderkin who wrote The Beach when he was just 26. He wrote 28 Days Later. He directed Ex Machina, Annihilation, which is my personal favorite of his. And then before this film, Warfare, his most recent film was Civil War. And I want to know, Dan, do you like Civil War? Did you like Civil War?
Yeah, I did. I got pretty heavy into that discourse. I actually just talked about it again today. It's rare that certain movies will get under my skin in a way with some of the discourse because like I feel like people are just disingenuous with how they engage with them. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things that I just find, movies that I found very frustrating, the discourse around them, and that was one of them. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I enjoyed it very much. And I think the main kind of, people called it cowardly. People said it didn't have anything to say. They called it vapid. I didn't see any of that, and I don't even think Alex Garland was trying to hide what he had to say. It's funny we're talking about this now. It dropped by GQ today, his interview breaking down a lot of his popular movies, and he talked about Civil War, and he lays it all out. And he lays out everything I've been saying and everyone else has been saying for the last, since the movie dropped. about what he was trying to do. And
not to simplify it, but what was that answer?
One of the things he focused on was he basically said he started writing this out of a place of seeing the political polarization of America.
Right.
But it's more than that, right? He's not just saying that and leaving it at that. I agree that would be a problem. He went on to say the reasoning behind, for example, everyone says, well, oh, California and Texas are on the same side. How is that a thing? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're dealing in reality. Like, that's supposed to show the entire point of the story. Like, it's not about California's a blue state, Texas is a red state. How would they be together? It's about when the president is a fascist and he's serving an illegal third term, which the movie lays out, and he's going after journalists and he's bombing American civilians, which they show in the movie. California and Texas shouldn't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, right?
Right.
It's about we're American. That's wrong. That's an authoritarian leader that doesn't reflect what we want. So they're together. That is the whole point of the movie. And currently, you can look at our situation and imply who's who. Like, it's not rocket science, but like people said, oh, he didn't say anything. And it's like they wanted like the president to look at the camera and be like, I'm Donald Trump. Like, that's what they want. Like, come on, man. Like, I thought it was really lazy, and he laid it all out very well today, but it frustrated me a bit.
On the set of Civil War, they began writing warfare, and Ray Mendoza described it as a therapeutic experience. He said that he would share the details of this specific incident and others in Iraq when he served. Garland would ask questions that Mendoza said were more precise and emotionally intelligent than even therapists would ask. And together, this partnership, they formed this film. So we mentioned the marketing. When it was announced, it had a pretty buzzy cast. Joseph Quinn, Charles Melton. You hear that it's about war. And I remember thinking, like, oh, brother, like, really? Civil War was about to come out. It was about to be very hot button. It was getting dinged for its own AI-created posters. There was pushback to warfare. It felt like people were gearing up to dislike it. And I think the movie and Alex Garland kind of courted that and wanted that.
I think it's funny because, like, there was so much discourse, at least from what I was seeing around Civil War, and I kind of led directly into people talking about his next project.
Right.
And, oh, like, what is he doing? He's making propaganda. It's like this and that. And it's like the conversations are very much linked. And I feel like the problems people have with it and the conversation around it is very much linked as well. And the solution there is very similar. I think you just have to dig a little bit into both of these movies and get past. I think sometimes people will have an expectation, and I've seen it with Warfare. They'll watch the movie and then they'll reinforce their previous assertion of the movie and say, "Oh, I was right. I knew it." And it's like, well, did you actually? It's just bad faith. Like, that's
right.
not. And again, I was more so positioned on not expecting to like this, and I took it at face value and I liked it.
I was kind of devilishly from the sidelines, like cheering on the chaos of the discourse because once I saw the movie, I think I got to see it in a screener about a month ago. I knew what it was, and you know what it was, and I think audiences now know what it is. I was kind of rubbing my hands like, oh boy, like, I hope they really wrong foot you even more because I've seen this movie. I know what it is. I know what it has to say. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'll always prefer, interesting discourse over a movie that just makes us feel nothing and there's nothing to talk about. I think that's always...
This isn't even that either. This is a great film.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Let's get into the film, and I'll throw it to you. What worked for you most within Warfare?
I think it's interesting to approach this like the performances. I think they're all good. They're all like good to very good. I don't really necessarily think anyone stood out in a way that was positive or negative. I liked what everyone was doing. I also think when you're dealing with a unit like this, this is not like a typical narrative where you have character development or growth. These are just people in a moment. It's 90 minutes basically in real time. You're not looking for that. I think when you think about the American military, one of the main aspects of our soldiers, especially at a high level, like with SEALs or Delta or Force Recon, whatever it is it's not about like individuality. It's about the uniform, like functioning as a cohesive unit. Like, granted, these guys still are individuals. They still care about each other. I think something that comes across in the film is that these guys maybe, you don't know how they feel about the conflict or anything, but they are fighting for each other.
Right.
And when you're fighting for the person next to you, that's the most effective fighting force.
Right. I mean, that's already blasting through the usual cliche of like, a movie I like, but like Platoon, it's like there's the angel soldier and the devil soldier, and which side will he go to? And that has its own time and place as well. But in this film, it wouldn't have worked. I thought the casting was great. It's your film buff friend's favorite actors, aka probably our favorite actors. So we mentioned Joseph Quinn, Tefera Wunatai from Res Dogs, Will Poulter, Cosmo Jarvis, Michael Gandolfini, Charles Melton comes in. It's a hell of a cast. But again, a bit against type where you're not getting such charming moments out of these very charming men. You're seeing them as a unit.
It's also funny because they're like all Brits too. Like,
I know. I mentioned the sense of realism. I thought for 90 minutes that I was there, and it's harrowing as hell. This was a strength of Civil War, but like the choreography and the blocking and the staging, I really knew geographically this house that they take from an Iraqi family. And I knew the rooms. And that's because before shit hits the fan, it's a very quiet movie. And it's Alex Garland using a very photographic eye of just showing us these quiet, lame-ass moments of waiting, which I think this is an explosive movie, but it has a lot of that quiet that I think exemplified this specific war. This is not trench warfare. This is not the jungle in Vietnam with mosquitoes buzzing around. This is just waiting and watching and taking houses from people that they shouldn't be taking it from. Before things blew up, I felt there in the moment because of that quiet aspect to the film.
Yeah, and I think it was very well paced. I think there was a perfect balance of maybe a half hour of that leading into everything else that happens. I think my grandfather was in World War II, fought till the end of the war. My dad has seen a lot of combat as like a contractor. They both had bad PTSD, which I've seen growing up, and I've kind of talked to them both a lot about like combat and losing friends and what firefights are like and this and that. And they both have talked a lot about the silence and the quiet in between the intensity. Like that can be equally terrifying and harrowing, and like how quiet and peaceful stuff can be, and how quickly it can kind of escalate. And I think we're oftentimes used to war movies being just like 2 hours of just nonstop gunfights and explosions and all. And I think like having that balance. And as you said, this war was a lot of sitting around and waiting. And I don't know if you've seen Jarhead.
Yes, I have. And a show I think this is much like is Generation Kill from David Simon on HBO, which also features much more waiting than it does action.
And Jarhead is literally all about the waiting in this war and sitting around and not having purpose. And I think they capture that in that little bit of this movie as well.
When the sound does come, the sensory experience this is wild. Like the sound mix was flawless. And the sound editor is Glenn Fremantle, which besides having a really cool name, he's an Oscar winner, which he won for sound design for Gravity. And this is loud. And it is shocking to have those quiet moments before this. Like the contrast really got to me. I'm curious if it got to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when Civil War came out, everyone talked about the sound design there. I think a lot of the success or impressive bits of sound design in Civil War were very much about how loud it was and how kind of oppressive like the gunfire was and explosions and all. I think warfare with their scenario is very much about the incoming rounds. Like that is what got me. I don't know how they went about creating that sound design. I would love to know, but like that felt incredibly real. And they're basically, they're pretty much fish in a barrel this entire time. And the terror of like being in a space that enclosed and having that amount of metal coming down range at you and just the auditory effect of that, I feel like they perfectly captured it. And it's terrifying. So that was my favorite part about it.
You already cited this, but I loved the opening scene as well, which is Eric Pridz's Call on Me, which people of a certain age song meant a lot to them. Maybe the music video did too. It tells you everything you need to know, but it also tells you nothing you need to know. It's got like a latent homoeroticism. It's just Bush era masculinity, like immediately. So you don't need to be told where you are, when you are. I thought that did the job beautifully, but also wrong-footed you, like you said, for what's about to come. So I just thought, as an opening, that was amazing. And then my other final positive is the closing of the film and the last shot. And I'm curious how that struck you, or if it did, which is spoiler, but our soldiers getting into their Bradley tanks, getting out of this situation. A couple of them died, a couple of the interpreters died. I don't remember the exact figures. The Iraqis they were fighting slowly emerge back onto the street. It's quite a sour note to this heroism, if you could even call it that we just witnessed. There are credits and there's photos that show them, but to me, this is the end of the film. And it was a real, what was any of that for kind of feeling. Like you cut off a Hydra's head, maybe, and now you got 2 more heads coming out.
Given we just talked about that silence and how that kind of leads into it, the way it kind of ends with, the Bradleys kind of have if there is a moment of like large military force, like from the U.S. forces, it's the Bradley fighting vehicles pretty much just like destroying this entire neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most like quote unquote impressive moment from, of kind of military like prowess from the U.S. in this. But I think allowing that dust to settle, and you first hit with the family, right? Like they kind of emerge. The father's trying to basically tell his kids and his wife like it's okay, they're gone, and seeing them all come out, because especially throughout the film, you don't see any of these like insurgents that they're fighting. Right. You don't get a good look at anyone. There's not some like mysterious villain
mustache. Villain. Yeah. Yeah,
it's just people, and I think finally getting to see them come out, I thought it was powerful, and the Bradleys pulling away, it very much felt like nothing was accomplished. The only thing that was accomplished was destruction, and I think that's the whole point. So
I've been told I'm wrong about this point by people that think he's amazing in this film, but I thought when Charles Melton came in, it broke a little bit of my spell of realism. He comes in like G.I. Joe and fucks shit up. On one hand, I'm like, great. Our guys need this help right now. Then on the other hand, I was like, but I'm in it with these fellas, and this, as heroic as this guy is, it just feels a little off. But I don't know. What did you think of Charles Melton and his appearance at the end?
What I took from that was I very much felt like that element of the team, or that segment of this platoon or whatever it was, maybe had more experience. Like they felt like people that had maybe seen more combat, had more time on the ground. It just felt like a very calming force. And like he was stepping in and understanding the situation, understanding that there was no leadership there and that he needed to basically take control of the situation. Another interesting part of that sequence is Elliot, Cosmo Jarvis's character, is the worst off. He's lying on the ground getting triage and stuff from Defaro Wunatai, who plays Ray Mendoza. And one of the soldiers that comes in with Melton's element is the only like gung-ho rah-rah person in the movie. Right. And he's like stepping on Elliot and like kicking him by accident and like yelling at him. And you see how foolish he looks in this scenario. And I just think like to see that and ignore it is just preposterous to me. Like I feel like there's something being said there. A typical movie, you might expect some more characters like that, and they're not there to be ironic. They're there to cheer for.
Right.
I understand where you're coming from. It didn't bother me, but I completely get your point of view, and I can see your perspective.
And then, this is maybe an unfair knock against the film, but it is sparse, and maybe that's its strength too. But it kind of stops it from being a Pantheon tier war film for me, but it's pretty damn close. A counterpoint to Charles Melton, to me, my favorite performance was Will Poulter, because he has really grown into quite a handsome, trustworthy, kind actor. Like that's kind of how I would describe him. And maybe I'm thinking specifically of the past couple seasons of The Bear, where he's really shown in a special way. And here he does bring a calm presence, but when he gets fucked up, he really gets fucked up. And to see him kind of break down, not in like a histrionic, oh my God, I'm breaking down. He just like turns to someone. He's like, I can't do it. I'm not feeling good. It's almost more heartbreaking than if he were to have that full on emotive thing. It really affected me. I thought he was tremendous when he was strong, and then tremendous again when he was weakened.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think he's a talented guy. I think he's going to be around for a long time, and I think even like Death of a Unicorn this year, I didn't like that movie. I thought he was great. Every single person that talked about it was like, Will Poulter was awesome, like whether they liked it or not. I feel like he's always giving effort, which is like the main thing I look for with actors is just like, are you trying? Like, I feel like the same thing with athletes. Like, are you trying? It's way easier to cheer for someone, I think, if they are giving that and it's obvious. But I agree. And I think with that scene, oftentimes I think we're all kind of trained to look for like that kind of sizzle reel acting with some kind of, something that can be turned into an edit for TikTok with someone screaming and, they're crying and yelling. And it's like, that's good acting. It's like, sometimes good acting is just subtlety and like nuance and conveying that there's something more going on under the surface that you're not necessarily beating the audience over the head with. And I love Cosmo Jarvis. Shogun was like one of my favorite things of all time. I think he's amazing. Probably, I guess, my favorite performance in this. But like I said, I feel like everyone was pretty much on the same playing field for me.
So before we wrap up, I want to ask you, where does Warfare stand in the War is Hell canon? Because I think there are, unfortunately, there are some War is Awesome movies, and you cited a few of them that maybe, definitely glorify the experience. But there's also a whole other side where shit gets really bleak and dark, and I would put this within that camp. What else to you achieves that?
I would say Platoon. I think Platoon flirts with it's a little more stylized and dramatic and all. Like I get that, but I still think it's really good. Come and See, obviously, Paths of Glory is one of my favorite Kubrick movies. I think it's spectacular. I think it's his simplest movie, but I think it's really effective. And I think World War I doesn't get talked about enough in media. Like, for how important that war was and what that war represented for the world, and the fact that it was this, like, you had these 19th century generals who had this perception of what war was, and then they were given 20th century weapons, and they had no idea how to combine those things, and they just got everyone killed. And they just treated their men like they were animals that could just be, like, slaughtered, and it didn't matter. And I think Paths of Glory, taking a real event that actually happened, is just a beautiful kind of representation of that. Thin Red Line is a movie I don't like, but I like what it's trying to do, and I think it does a decent job of this. Full Metal Jacket, in a way, I think, again, it's kind of dramatized. There's some, like, really stylized moments, but I think it does a good job. And then I think Jarhead is, like, so disgustingly undervalued. Like, I think I've talked about it before. I talked about it like when I started on TikTok, and a lot of people were like, oh, I kind of assumed this was another like kind of like glorification of the war. And, and I'm like, there's literally no combat. It's not a movie about combat. It's a movie about the country and the soldiers and just spending time there doing nothing and achieving nothing, and like what that does to people. I think those are all good.
Great list. I got nothing to add.
All Quiet too.
I had that down. Generation Kill, I referenced a little earlier. Highly recommend. Peter Weir film Gallipoli, which is just the saddest fucking thing
I've ever
to watch
seen.
That. It will make any grown man weep. Back to Warfare before we wrap up. $8 million made this past weekend off a $20 million budget. A- cinema score. Can this leg out and make some money? It's got a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 76% on Metacritic. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'll let you share with the listeners what you gave it, but I'm curious if you think it can make some dough, if it could have some word of mouth.
Yeah, I gave this a 5 out of 5, which is my second of the year, and it's my second favorite movie of the year. We've talked a lot about the discourse, etc. I don't want to keep going, but I think this movie is interesting because I think this movie can make money, like, with both sides of the political aisle. I think no matter what you want to take from it, you kind of can take that from it. It pays respect to our veterans who are, currently in a bad way in terms of how they're being cared for, but that has kind of been true for a long time, regardless of who's in leadership, but I think it's especially bad right now. I think it's really important, and when you listen to them talk about why he made this movie, part of it was he said he's hoping some politicians can see it and understand what these guys went through. About 6,500 veterans take their own lives every single year in the 21st century. That's about what it's been. It's a good way to pay respect to them, and also a good way to show we need to stop going into these stupid ass wars like this and show the impact on the place and the people and our people, and just ask why. Which is what the woman asked Will Poulter, the Iraqi woman. Why? Like, why? What's the reason? So anyway, I think no matter who you are, you can probably enjoy this. Maybe not enjoy, but like take something from it, and it'll leave a mark on you. So I hope it can succeed.
Damn, that was a way more nuanced answer than will it make money. Now I feel very gauche. No, I'm kidding. That was great. That was really fantastic. And people should definitely see this movie. Rewatchability factor of maybe 0, but it's damn good filmmaking. And I'm kidding. I kind of do want to see it again to take in just like the sheer filmmaking of it. Like, there were a lot of things I was just wrapped up in the moment, but I want to watch it and like think how did they do that? How did they pull this off, the filmmaker?
Yeah, and I'd like to go back and watch it at least one more time in the theater because I had a screening and I'd like to pay money and support it. So, like, I'll definitely go back at least once, I think.
All right, Dan, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on the Schmearcast. You will be back soon because you will be recapping Andor with me and Sean Byrne, Modern Mythos. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah.
That is a great show. Can you give me one sentence on why you love Andor?
I love Andor because all I really look for from Star Wars is fresh approaches. And I think whether that succeeds or fails, I appreciate it. I think the fan base, not even in a toxic way, just in what they want, oftentimes holds things back because they want to see just stuff retread and they don't want...
You could say it's in a toxic way.
For some people, it definitely is, but I think some people also just have like such an emotional investment.
Sure.
You know, their characters, this and that, but like, we don't need more Kenobi. Like, I'm sorry, we don't. They had an idea for a fight scene, and then they made up a bunch of shit before that to get to the fight scene. And it's like, just make a short with the fight scene. Like, you know what I mean? Like, give me
all right, before we get Dan too hot and bothered, we'll save all this good stuff for next week. That's a little preview of some Andor talk and what to expect there. I'm very excited for that. But Dan, this was great today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All righty.